Okay, I think we're live. Let me just... Okay, perfect. We're live. Hi, everyone. I think we'll wait for a few minutes. Let's see if people walk in.
I think we can. Let's start immediately.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Manya. I've been working with Management Masters for Content and Growth for a month now, and I've had incredible fun. And follow our LinkedIn, follow our YouTube, look at all of the stuff that we've been putting out. We're working really hard to consistently get you good and educational content on the top MBA programs. And in this stead, we've been organizing a lot of sessions on applying to top MBA programs in the world, applying to ISB, any questions that any of you have on how to score well, how to, frame your profile well. And today we have with us Piyush Ranjan and Niketa Desai on a webinar on how to present yourself in the best possible manner for top MBA programs all over the world. We'd like to begin without any delay. So let's start with introductions. Piyush, would you like to introduce yourself first?
All right. Thank you, Manya, for organizing this. Hi, everyone. My name is Piyush. I'm the founder of Management Masters. We are a boutique admissions consulting firm for the top MBA programs around the world. And we've been doing this for the last 4 years. We started in 2019. And since then, candidates have gone on to top schools like the M7 schools, the E7 schools, with almost $1 million in scholarships as well. So that's a very short bit about me. I'll sort of hand it over to Niketa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Niketa Desai. Like Piyush, I also run a boutique advisory firm called Admit Beacon. Like him, specialize in top MBA programs. I also advise on a lot of specialized masters, policy, healthcare, education, anything and everything in between. I've been at it for about 7 years now, and happy to answer any questions you have. Just for reference, I went to Chicago Booth in 2010 and was an admissions leader there, and just doing my bit to pay forward.
Thank you so much, Piyush and Niketa. I think we'll jump right in. So we collected a lot of questions from our LinkedIn, from WhatsApp, from our own community, which I suggest that you join. The links are on our LinkedIn page. You will find them everywhere. Subscribe to the channel, because you need to subscribe to the channel to ask any questions that you want. And we'll look through the chat as well throughout the session. So let's just get started. The first question that we've gotten, and we've gotten this from a lot of people, and I'm sure that you've also heard it a lot in any profile evaluation that you've done, is how do I decide if I should go for an MBA?
Right. Niketa, do you want to take that?
Absolutely. I think an MBA is a very long-term investment and a very simple framework that anybody would want to use to decide on the MBA is where do you want to be 10 years down the line? Where do you want to be 5 years? If any of those outcomes, right, require an MBA, that is a good first step to decide whether an MBA is right for you. I'll give you my personal experience. I was a tech administrator, I worked at the data center, and I wanted to be a consultant. So it made sense because back in the day, the only consulting jobs that McKinsey, BCG get were through top MBA programs. And it made sense for me because I had a vision of becoming a consultant, and MBA was a good next step. So the right advice here is to sit down, figure out whether your career outcome, 5 years hence, 10 years hence, 15 years hence, values an MBA program, necessitates an MBA program, or requires skills, right? Like leadership presence, networks, so on and so forth, right? That make the MBA essential. And that is how I would decide on an MBA program.
Right.
What are your views?
Absolutely. I think what you mentioned is very critical, right? So aligning it with where do you see yourself in the next few years, that is super, super critical. Because at the end of the day, that is the short-term output that you get from an MBA. If you don't have a vision of where you see yourself over the next few years, and why is an MBA critical for you, it will become very difficult for you to justify it to the B schools as well, not just in building your applications, but also justifying it to the admission committees that you really require one. Uh, Another thing that comes up very, very frequently when candidates reach out to me is, a lot of people have lived in India or in just one city their entire lives, and they want to leverage the MBA to explore different things. That is a good reason to talk about, but at the same time, again, it will always go down to what Nikita said. Ki, that's great that you want to explore, but again, where do you see yourself going from there? Once you have explored, what is the vision that you sort of build? So the first thing probably that you will need to sort of build upon is, where exactly do you see yourself going, and does an MBA actually fit within that journey that you have?
Absolutely.
Right.
I completely agree. I think there are experience related aspects of the MBA that are also valuable. A lot of people, and I think this is a very valid reason. A lot of people I work with or I've spoken to have come in and asked me how should they decide on it, right? And for some folks, it is about the experience, right? To discover what is it that they truly would like to do, basis what the emerging set of opportunities are, right? In other industries, in the same industry, in other geographies. So I think that's a very valid point to bring up. It's a very good sometimes step back to take and reflect and explore.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Piyush and Nikita. We'll move to the second question. What can candidates do to improve their chances if they have 2 or 3 years before applying?
Right. So maybe I'll start with this one, right? Uh, I think first of all, congratulations that you have figured out that 2 years, 3 years down the line, you would want to go for an MBA, because then you can sort of build a plan for yourself of how you might want to improve on that. Uh, I think the first step that you need to take in that case is to first figure out, again, not just 2, 3 years down the line that you want to go for an MBA, but where do you see yourself going beyond that, right? And then based on that goal that you set for yourself, try to understand what are the skills that you can develop pre-MBA, so that you can, when you build your MBA application, you can sort of really strengthen up and showcase that you bring those transferable skills. Uh, at the same time, when you start doing this, you will obviously find schools that align with your vision, and the kind of schools that you might want to attend, right? For example, if you want to get into product management, you're working in tech right now, and maybe 4 years down the line, you would want to work as a product manager. You will find that probably Berkeley Haas is one of your top schools. If you figure that out, check out Berkeley Haas, make sure that you know everything about the program and what is their requirement in terms of the profiles that they admit, right? And then sort of try and build up your profile accordingly, because you will need to take the GMAT. There are lots of moving parts when it comes to applying for MBAs. So you take the GMAT, which aligns with the Berkeley Haas profile. Try to take up courses or build your rigor, academic rigor, if that is something that you lack on. If not, then it's absolutely fine. Focus on your career, build, try to get as much experience, relevant experience, which can help you propel yourself towards the MBA program. Right. So, yeah. Sorry, Nikita, anything that you would want to
I
add?
think one of the most important things I would recommend in addition to that, Piyush, right, is sensitization. If you know you are going to get there, just start finding out what it takes, right? Subscribe to the school's YouTube channels, attend their information sessions. You don't have to do all of that in the year that you are applying. You can start doing that many years earlier, right? Just to get a sense of what is it that they see, what is it that it is going to take. And that will help you sort of do this at a good pace, right? Get done with your GMAT. Getting it done in the year before you apply is always a great advice, right? Because then you have ample time for reflection and essays. Leverage social media well. A lot of what you can learn, like for a lot of people who are not based in the US, right? School visits and everything is kind of a challenge, right? Nobody is going to go and visit. But there's enough in terms of school tours, interviews, that's on YouTube or Instagram. Just let the social media also work for you so that you are in the circle and in the know of what it is going to take. right? And you will at that point in time have very few basic questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
At that
something I
point
would
of time, you
advise.
won't be asking somebody, Haas ka
Yes.
average kya hai?
Now that you bring up Haas, right? Let me add a little snippet there. Haas requires Indian students to take the TOEFL score, right? So that is something you would
Yeah.
rather know, right, in the 2 years before you
Right.
apply. Also,
And that
Haas
with a
does.
3-year degree, you cannot apply to
Yes,
Haas.
I was just coming to that, right? That things, minor things like the University of Texas McCombs and the UCLA and Haas, right? The University of California systems do not recognize 3-year undergraduate degrees as valid for X. Right? So if you want to take like a 1-year program and that is a necessity, right? Be aware and start planning on it.
Right. Absolutely. So again, I think what both of us have said essentially boils down to build your knowledge base as much as
Yes,
possible,
be in the know.
analyze what you have, what you don't have, and identify your gaps, and then start working towards those gaps. If you have 2-3 years time before your application.
Be in the know. Another thing I would like to add, right, which a lot of people, young folks, do not do, right, is maintain an active journal of the work you've done, the feedback you get, the skills you're learning, all the conversations that are happening in the workplace, right? Every quarterly review or half yearly performance review you get, note down everything that you've done at work, because at the time of writing applications, right, this journaling and what you note down will be absolutely critical.
Yeah, that can make your life much easier when you actually end up applying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for those insights. Okay, so the next question that we have is based on candidate profiles. And a lot of people have asked if schools look for a specific type of candidates or if particular roles, companies, or colleges have advantages over the others. And I think someone in the chat has also stated something about ISB. It's sort of generally accepting students with roles like IT and consulting, but not core engineering roles. So would you like to shed some light on if, some roles have some advantages over others?
Right. Uh, do you want to take that, Nikita, or should I?
I'm happy to pitch it once you start.
Right. Uh, I think my basic answer is going to be yes, absolutely. There is going to be an advantage with certain kind of roles and certain kind of industries or colleges that you come from. The base reason is because this will only happen if you come from some of the top-notch companies, top-notch colleges, top-notch jobs that you might find, right? And the reason for that is going to be because whoever is getting into those kind of roles, colleges, companies, has done that because they have been excellent, right? So when you see somebody, for instance, I'll just give you a very, very small example. If you hear somebody, if you meet somebody who comes from IIT Bombay, right? You don't even know their branch, you don't even know their rank. The moment you hear IIT Bombay, the first thing that probably goes into your mind is this guy is going to be a very, very smart person, right? Because the tag of the brand that you bring already carries weight. So, yes, there is going to be a slight advantage. But this is where I think most people make the mistake of believing that it's just the tag that carries them forward, right? The tag is very, very important or very useful in creating that initial impression that you create. But that's it. After that, you have to present yourself as a strong candidate. Otherwise, you're not going to go forward in the process. So, tags or brands or specific roles like coming from a consulting background, all of these can be very good starting points for you. They do give you advantages, but it's not enough for B schools to give you an admit. For B schools to get admits from top B schools, they will need to do the same things that others have to do, and that is to present themselves as aligned with what the B schools are looking for. That is to present a very clear vision of what they want to achieve in their lives and how does the MBA actually fit in their goals, right? If they are not able to do that, then whatever tags or whatever they might have done previously will not really be fruitful for them. Anything you would want to add, Nikita?
Yeah, I think I would like to add that with the tag and with everything you've said, there also comes a risk of overrepresentation, right? So if you are not one of those, I would not fear, right? I think I would think about it as diversity and I think I'll be very honest. I think that the diversity in business schools across the world has been on the rise, right? It is partly a function of what the employers also want, right? The employers want a more diverse workforce in terms of not just gender, right? Also in terms of life experiences and so on and so forth, because increasingly that type of problems employers are solving. Is cross-functional and requires multiple perspectives. So I wouldn't worry if it is a lot of brand name handicap on your resume. I didn't come from a IIT. I didn't come from any major feeder organization or feeder profile for that matter. But I found that when you go to business school, you learn, but you can also contribute. So I wouldn't worry, and I would still put my best foot in. But like you said, I would make it very clear what value I would add to the classroom. What would be my voice in the classroom or in my community? I would be very clear about that in the application.
Right. Also, just I think you asked a question, Manya, regarding ISB IT consultant versus core engineering. Uh, Again, I think both of us mentioned this, that don't worry about it, right? If you present yourself properly, if you present yourself with a clear perspective of why is the MBA important for you, why ISB is important for you, how will it help you grow with your in your career, in your perspectives, and if you're able to sort of build a solid application, whether you come from an IT consultant background, whether you come from core engineering backgrounds, or whether you come from whichever background, you might even be a software developer, the most overrepresented field in ISB, uh, you will be able to get, right? That clarity of thought that you present in your applications is supremely important, much more important than what you see as your on paper profile.
Isn't the essay question change on ISB really indicating what you're saying, right? That
Exactly.
even though they want a professionally homogeneous possibly pool, right, that they can ultimately place forward, right, that they can get jobs to, right? They want diversity in personal experience. The essay question
Right.
clearly says that.
Absolutely. They're much more personal focused. They're much more focused on finding candidates now who are able to introspect and who are able to sort of assess and figure out who they are as people, than just having this is what I
Yeah.
bring, or this is what my goal is. These are the courses at ISB
Yeah.
that will help me get to my goals. They are not looking at that anymore. They will be looking at that, obviously. It's still a very important part of the process, but they
Yes.
also want people who are able to introspect.
Yes.
So that's very,
Absolutely.
very critical.
Thank
Right.
you so much. Thank you for answering that. And I hope, Saurav, that your question was also answered. So the next, also for people in the chat who've been talking about low GPA or career gaps, we will be getting to those questions very, very soon. So stick around. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. This is about application planning. And people have asked if they're starting now, if they're starting on their application process now, how can they plan their timelines for this year's applications, which would be, I think, the 2024 intake. Sorry, 2020.
Yeah, 2024 intake. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very, very interesting question, and I think maybe our views might be very different here. But if you're starting now, if I take the lead on this question, my suggestion is figure out the most dream school that you have. When I say dream school, I mean the school that you would absolutely love to go to, and you have a profile which fits with that school profile. I'm not talking about hot shot or moonshot schools. Identify one or two schools maximum, and depending on when they have their deadlines, just work on one or two schools. Because from now on, assuming that you have not started working on your applications at all, there's a lot of things that you will need to do, and that includes introspecting on your essays, introspecting on your own experiences, figuring out what you have done, why you have done those things, building out your resume, building out the application form, getting your LORs done. So there's a lot of moving parts within the application, and it's a huge process, right? So if you decide to focus on multiple schools at the same time, it's quite likely that you will not be able to focus on any of the applications properly, and you will be essentially submitting a very rushed application. So at this point of time, usually when candidates reach out to us, I tell them focus on maybe one or maximum two schools, because from now until September, you hardly have 1.5 to 2 months left. And that's not a lot of time when it comes to if you are just starting, right?
Yeah. I think what I would like to add is you're very correct, right, in terms of timing and like do good, do less, right? But the other point I would add is look for adjacencies, right? If there is schools with similar type of
Mm.
applications and are doable, right, and you can plan your time around it. Some applications might really be weekend applications, right? If you have done one application, right, and if they're spaced apart and you have like a weekend there, try and put in an application. Also apply through the site. And if it is mid-September, which is fair, there is a lot of early action. European schools have a deadline every month. Keep on applying, right? Don't wait for a particular time for all the applications to be ready. Keep applying basis, like build a calendar, right? With
Yeah,
a timeline view and a adjacency view, right? Of what can I get done given what I have, right? And take
yeah,
that view. I think that might be a good addition to profile where you want to go, where you can go.
right, right. But I think both of us would agree very specifically that you have to be absolutely consistent now. Now is not the time when you spend time trying to figure out trying to figure out trivial issues within your application. Now is not the time to waste, right? uh,
Yeah.
Ideally there should not be a single week where you don't work on your applications at this time, right? You need to start now, whether you do it on your own, whether you do it with a consultant, whether you take the help of a friend, but you need to start working on your applications, because otherwise you're going to be in a very, very difficult situation as the deadlines start approaching.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need a milestone driven uh, daily approach to this,
Yeah.
possibly. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for answering that question. Okay. So we're going to move on to the next one. We're going to move on to working with admissions consultants. So who would you suggest should work with admissions consultants? A, what benefits do they get? B, and when in their application process should they approach consultants?
That's a very good question. Let me go first, Piyush, on this one, if I
Absolutely.
may. Uh, Disclaimer here: I did not use an application consultant. Neither did Piyush. The industry did not exist when we applied. Right? It's a very nascent, very recent industry. Um, let me start by answering who needs an application consultant. Not everybody would be my answer. You need a village. Absolutely. You need friends, you need family, you need a certain drive to finish what Piyush has been saying. It's a very, very long process. And I had somebody help me out, friend, a very close friend, who was aware of the whole application process and never used one, right? If you're that type of person who has a village, who comes from a certain set of uh, sort of professions and school circles or your alumni, your brothers, family, all that, by all means leverage them. Application consultants serve two, three different purposes, right? They are project managers in some sense. If you're doing a lot of schools in a lot less time and you want to optimize your time, not looking for stuff like, do I need to write the TOEFL? Will I get a 3-year degree and apply to us? Those type of basic questions you need like real support on. Yeah, there is some amount of accumulated knowledge and sort of sharp advice that consultants can bring through. So they're project managers, essentially. They'll help you get more done in less time. Right. Second is they might serve as a sort of great sounding boards, right? If you feel like you don't have a great village to sort of run your ideas by, who fully doesn't understand post MBA career options or school nuances, that's a good reason to speak to them. Um, and third, they can be a little bit of a champion. It's a very long process and it goes through its own set of, ups, downs, and so on. So forth. Then you need like a little bit of a cheerleader or champion throughout the journey if you need one. Right? Again, this is all in the absence of a village type of scenario. If you have a village, by all means, you can choose to engage with the consultant or not in whatever capacity you might.
Right. Absolutely. I don't think, I think you've covered most of it very, very nicely. A lot of people, I think I would rather touch upon it in a slightly different way. Why should you not choose an admission consultant,
That's
right?
very good.
So if, let's say, first of all, again, build that knowledge base. What are the different things that you need to do to be able to submit an application? Once you have that understanding, try to see, are you able to do everything on your own? And will you be able to sort of manage all those things within the stipulated time that you have, right? Because every school has their own deadlines. You know exactly by when do you need to submit what. If at any point you feel like you might not be able to give your best, then go for an application consultant, then go for admission consultant, seek help from anybody you can find who has knowledge of it. But if you feel like you'll be able to do all these things without any worry, you have the motivation and the drive that you'll be able to do it, right? Then you don't need an admission consultant, right? Then why pay us lakhs of rupees just to get done what you could have done already by yourself, right? So in that case, I would say do not engage with admission consultants because they would not add much value. But if at any given stage you feel like you might not give your best or you would require support, ask for support because you will do your MBA probably only once. And hopefully, it does not happen practically, but hopefully this would be the last year that you end up applying for an MBA application. Essentially meaning that hopefully you'll get through. So make sure that you build your best application, give the best sort of show that you can do, and do everything that you can to create that best possible show for yourself, right? So find people who will champion you, as Niketa said. And if you're unable to find people around you, then absolutely go for admission consultants. If you find people who do that, then you don't need us.
No, absolutely. Just I'll add like one last thing here. You mentioned a very nice point, Piyush, about see what you can do yourself, right? If at any point in time, right, that introspection leads you to an exercise that says, listen, I need help on ABC matters. By all means, only engage on ABC, right? There is no need to be sort of engaging an application consultant for all your needs, right? You might be able to prioritize and figure out what is it that you
Right.
need most help on, right? I
Right.
think that's also a very good way to realize midpoint in your journey. But yes, it should start with, do I need one? What do I need an admissions consultant for, right? And how much support do I need, right? Having clarity on that answer will be extremely useful. And if all those answers are no, that's a good idea. For both of us, the answers were no, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think if I recall correctly, I got my GMAT score done, and then I got an unsolicited call from somebody who said, do you require help with applications? And I was like, what kind of help are you referring to? They're like, we'll write your essays for you. I'm like, no, thank you. I'll write my essays on your. The girl was shocked. What? You will write your essays on your own? Like, yes. Okay, but just humor me. How much do you charge for this? And she mentioned an amount, and I was flabbergasted. Like, what? You charge so much for answers? I can write my own essays. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if you don't need help, if you feel like the reason why I was able to say no, that I'll write my own essays, and obviously even the people who work with us, they write their own essays. So the reason I was able to say that because I knew that you know I had clarity in terms of what I wanted to write. I had published a book before. I had been blogging for years at that point of time, so I did not feel that I needed inputs in terms of where or how to present myself.
Yeah.
I still did that. I still took feedback from a few friends and seniors who had gone on to top programs around the world. So I did take feedback from them, but then I was able to mold their advice into what worked best for me. So I did not feel that need. I'm pretty sure something similar happened with Niketa as well. She did not feel the need.
Absolutely. I
And
did not feel,
if
like I said, I had support, right? I had good
exactly,
friends. I used forums, and back in the day, they were very, very useful. Also, even now, they're very useful. I think the
absolutely.
amount of free content out there is just humongous, right? So,
Yeah,
a driven person who kind of plans ahead may really not need one.
yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Piyush and Nikita, for that extremely nuanced answer. We will now move on to the next question, and this is about what can candidates do to overcome the following challenges in their applications. So basically, I'm going to give you a list of challenges that people have brought up quite a lot in our form, in the comments right now, and then you can let us know. So I think the first thing that people have been talking about quite a bit has been low academic history, which is having a low GPA or coming from a tier 3 college. I think I think Vishnu in the chat has been talking about having a distance degree with maybe a lower academic score. So how does that affect, their candidature? Aishwarya
Right.
as well, I think, has the same question. Is a low GPA something that means that I shouldn't go for, and they're going to for a deferred MBA admit? Is that something that, how much does that deter their
Right.
chances? So
Right.
yeah, please.
Uh, Maybe I'll start with a very quick sort of snippet on this, and then I think Nikita has some very, very nice pointers on this. I have seen her blog on this one. Uh, so, in short, I think there are three things that you can do. The first one is, or rather, even before you do that, the first thing is yes, if you have low grades, if you have low performance, it will affect, right? It will affect your application if you leave it be. If that is all that you bring to the table, then yes, obviously it is going to affect. Even if you have taken steps to counter that, there would still be schools where, you know, it might affect because some schools would demand a certain level of pedigree from the candidates, right? So some schools might say, "Ki, we agree that that might have been a phase and you are a very, very good candidate academically, but we don't care. We want people who have been excellent their entire life." There would be those cases as well. But there are steps that you can take to sort of offset your low GPA or lower academic credential. And the first thing in that is your test score. So the GMAT, GRE scores become extremely important, especially when you have lower academic credentials. Because these things, the educational qualifications, especially the bachelor's degree grades and the GMAT, collectively, I think, believe uh, they might account for almost a quarter or a slightly bit more weightage in your applications, right? The academic aspects overall. And there, the test scores can really help prop you up, showcase that, whatever happened in bachelor's happened, but you have the academic credentials, you have the quantitative ability to be able to sort of match up to the rigor of the B school's curriculum. That's the first thing. The second thing is try and sort of build out an extra course or try and sort of build an alternative transcript for yourself. So take up extra courses, take up quant-based business courses if possible, and score highly on those to again show to the B schools that now you are serious and you have better quant abilities than what is expressed through your degree. And third is the optionalism, right? Make sure that the schools know why did you get those low scores, what mistakes did you make, where did you falter because of which uh, you have lower performance, right? Uh, Anything that you think uh, you would want to add, Nikita?
I think what I would also do is answer why. If you have an obvious answer to why the academics suffered, and some people might have a very genuine answer, right? Answer that why. Don't leave it
Yeah.
unexplained. Answer that why. Maybe take on, demonstrate rigor, right? The ability to survive a sort of rigorous environment through other parts of your application. You have a low GPA, you work in an analytically heavy job. Get your recommendations to sort of speak about how rigorous and how persistent you have been. The GPA is a measure of have you been doing what you are supposed to do for
Yeah.
4 years in a row, right? If I have to put it simply, right? And not like, okay, did I score 10 in the last semester or did I score 10 in the last 2 semesters, right? So consistency and the ability to withstand rigor is what a GPA really represents. Right? If you can demonstrate that, I think like that emotion through other aspects, do that. Or justify, I was sick, I wasn't able to adjust to the environment, did not enjoy the academics, maybe there was no way to change my field, I don't know what, right? Whatever the explanation is, go ahead and do it.
Right. Right. So make sure, I think that optional essay becomes very important, right? Because
Yeah.
that will allow you to talk to the admissions committee and walk them through your context, what exactly happened with you and why, you have those grades or, lower performance during that phase of your life.
Yeah.
And that could be very, very, that is a very, very important tool and sort of weapon that you have that you can wield sort of counter this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much. Before we move on, there's one more part to this question to the academic history part. Also, Devamita in the chat is asking what might be some quant courses that you're referring in this context. So if you could answer
Mm.
that, that would be great. But the other part of the question was, what if you're coming from a tier 3 college, as opposed to, colleges that are more well known?
Mhm.
How would you overcome that challenge when it comes to your application?
It's the same thing, right? So if you come from tier 3 colleges, it's the same thing. You explain why did you get to the tier 3 college, how did you perform within the tier 3 college, right? If you come from a tier 3 college and there also you have been among the lowest performers, and then you expect to get into Harvard by saying, you have a 750 in GMAT, that's very unlikely to happen, to be very honest, right? Unless you have a very clear story of why did that happen. If let's say you have a story that you came from a place where you had no guidance, and that tier 3 college itself was the best college that you knew of, and you always wanted to get into that, that allows you to explain your context. But if it has been the result of not being able to perform, then again, for some schools that 750 might work, for some other schools it might not work. So make sure that you make the schools aware of your context, and that is something that you can do. In terms of the quant based courses, one of the courses that we usually suggest to candidates, especially when they have time available with them, is the HBS core program. Uh, Also, financially, it's a very, very intensive program, so you have to keep that in mind. And the other thing that we usually suggest is specifically for quant based performance, if you want to showcase quantitative abilities, then one thing that we suggest is the MBA math course, which is a very, very flexible program, also accepted by a lot of schools to showcase your quantitative ability. Anything, Niketa, that you
No,
suggest
I think you're on
specifically?
point. You're on point on all of those.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll move on to the next part of this question, which is how do you overcome the challenge of having multiple career switches or career gaps? I think that Anish in the chat has been asking about it, how layoffs or career gaps affect, your application, considering that rehiring will take some time if there's a hiring freeze. So yes,
Right.
career switches and career gaps.
Um, Can I go first? I
Yeah,
can talk
absolutely.
about the
Absolutely.
gaps part. I think let's particularly talk about the layoffs. It's a burning issue a little bit. Um, my assessment is that the schools have become a lot more amenable to the fact that these things are happening. Last year, when mass layoffs happened, they extended their round deadlines and also sort of became more considerate, waiving GMAT and so on. So people could come back to school. So if that is the case with you, I would not be afraid. I would still sort of lean back on the additional essay and explain the circumstances in which the company had to downsize and the redundancy of your role, and write about it candidly without sounding too negative, right? I don't think it is anybody's fault that we are in this situation. It's just a function of the business environment and so on and so forth. Put it out there and talk about what are you doing in this period in addition to sort of striving for the next employment. Talk about how are you using this period well to skill up, to explore other things, do whatever. Right? Don't leave it unaddressed. Right?
Right.
Be gentle, be nice and honest about that assessment. The same goes for career gaps, right? Be clear and address them. Don't leave a career gap unaddressed. You took a career gap to prepare for, I don't know, government services exams, right? And it did not work out, right? Talk about it in your application. Additional essay, talk about how intense prep and academics shape your worldview. You would have studied history, you would have studied a lot of things that you don't study, right? How did that open your mind? Talk about it, right? And talk about how the inability to sort of secure that outcome, I'm being very specific here, sort of shaped you as an individual, and just move on to the next career. That's about it.
Right. Absolutely. I think that optional essay is something which is very crucial, whether it's when you're addressing any kind of challenges with your profile, right? Be it career
Yes.
gaps, be it low academics, because it allows you to share that context with the admission teams. Just to sort of elaborate on this, I think Nikita already mentioned a very, very clear example. If you were preparing for UPSC and you took a career gap, explain that reason. Uh, we have had candidates who have had multi-year gaps because of UPSC, and they are currently studying at top B schools. We've also had candidates who took gaps because they wanted to take a break, right? They wanted to take care of their mental health, right? They wanted to take a break, and they were in that break for almost a year. And that's when they decided, maybe an MBA is a good forward option for me. They applied and they got through as well, right? Because they were very candid about why did they take the break, because they sort of helped the B school understand their perspective of where they were coming from. So that is something which is very, very important to address when you sort of, whatever you do, whether it's a career gap, whether you have changed jobs multiple times, give the schools your context.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll move to the next part of the question, which is low work experience and high work experience. And I think a lot of people in the chat have also been talking about it. Hemant has been asking if he has 7 years of experience, if it's too much for a US business school, if it's considered more. And yeah,
Right.
a few people have been
So
asking.
just to
Yeah.
address, I think I've had two admits to Wharton. Both of them had almost 8 years of experience at the time of joining Wharton. So Hemant, you're absolutely fine. Please go ahead and apply to these schools. Uh, Niketa, I'd let you answer this
Yeah,
question.
yeah, same here. I work with a lot of senior folks. I have worked with somebody who's worked about 9.5 years before.
Exactly. Right.
So I
So
don't think the age is, and on the other end as well, right? There are people who have done not so much in their career, but outside of their career, in their community and so on and so forth, much earlier in their lives, and they felt that they were ready to go to business school, so they joined when they had 3.5 years of work experience or 4 years. As long as you can demonstrate that you're ready, I think you should be fine.
right. I think the only challenge that I've seen with very low work experience candidate is they struggle to bring that maturity in their applications a lot of times, right? And but if they are able to showcase that maturity, if they are able to sort of highlight very clear examples from their life and showcase how they have been shaped into the kind of person that they are, they're able to do pretty well on the applications as well.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that question, Piyush and Niketa. And Hemant, Anish, I hope that your question was answered. I hope that that helped. Okay, so this isn't on our list of questions, but I think it's been popping up quite a bit. Is also part of this is, can you touch very lightly on unconventional work backgrounds and having a second MBA? I think Hemant as well as Mrityunjay have been asking this question on the chat. So maybe this might help them.
A second MBA, you really want to be very, very specific of why do you need more business education. Maybe you exhausted all the learnings from your first business education. You are moving into a new direction that needs reskilling. Maybe you're moving into a leadership role or a differentiated type of role that needs a differentiated type of skill set. You want to be very clear. Again, fall back on the optional essay. Talk really about why the second MBA is necessary. Also be mindful that most schools will not appreciate a second MBA. Right? There will be a lot of schools that will appreciate. There is a lot of schools that will equally not appreciate. Right? So a school like TUP will not appreciate a second MBA unless you very clearly tell them why. Why is that?
Right. I think that
And the other piece, sorry, was just one second.
Sorry.
Just back to back, right? You got an MBA, you 3 years, and you're saying I want another MBA. Yeah, we've seen cases go in with that type of thing, but that's very, very rare. That's not the norm, right? Most second MBA folks are sort of 5 years, 5.5 years out in their career and figure out again, might need to switch.
Right. Absolutely. I think, again, setting that context becomes very, very important. I think this is becoming the context of our conversation here, setting the right context for applications overall.
Yeah.
But again, it's very important to showcase to the B schools why exactly do you need an MBA. So we have had candidates who worked with us who wanted to apply for a second MBA. And the one thing that I think we worked most with them on was essentially why did they want a second MBA? That justification or that clarity of thought in terms of what would a second MBA bring to them, which they did not already have from their first degree, right? And that needs to be absolutely clearly explained to the B schools, because otherwise, uh, you run the risk of just you know sounding like somebody who's rushing after things without really understanding what they are doing, right? And B schools, especially top schools, are very particular about who they admit. Uh, what do those people want out of the degree that they're applying for, right? So that's something I think you need to be very, very clear about. The same applies for unconventional backgrounds as well. If you come from, I think that was the second part of the question. If you come from backgrounds which are not MBA heavy, right? If you want to go into those fields, again, you need to be very clear why is getting an MBA for you so important in that case, right? And if you're able to set that, if you're able to sort of very clearly picturize this is how it will help you, then that will really act as a big boost for you, because you will become a huge diversity candidate, right? And you will have a very, very strong profile based on that. But if you so recently, I think, and we would have this interview coming out very shortly as well. We worked with an ISRO rocket scientist last year, right? And one of the biggest things that stood out in his application was that he was a rocket scientist applying for an MBA, right? And because we were able to help him build a very clear narrative of why he wanted to go for an MBA, that helped him get into Kellogg, even though he had a 6-pointer in his GPA, right? So getting that clarity of why exactly do you want an MBA and how would you leverage that, despite coming from a field which is not very conventional in the MBA world, will give you a huge advantage in terms of your diversity that you bring to the class, uh, and can take care of a lot of negatives as well. But if you don't have that clarity, then you would not have any advantage either, right? Anything, Nikita, you would want to add to
No, I
this?
think you're absolutely on point, Piyush, here. You have to demonstrate why you want the MBA. Like, why is it important to the next job or next career outcome you want? And then what transferable skills do you bring, right? So, for
Exactly.
example, in the context of your rocket scientist candidate, he would have demonstrated how he understands space and how he understands technology, how technology can be commercialized, and why that view on deep technology can be really useful for the rest of the class, right?
Yep.
That probably wants to be an investor in deep tech, whatever, right? You have to be very clear about why your knowledge is useful to the rest 499 people, right?
Yep.
And why you want to be there, right? So that it has to be a very clear give and take. Right? That part has
Yep.
to be extremely clear for unorthodox candidates.
Thank you so much. Hemant, I hope that answered your question, and everyone else in the chat who was asking the same thing. And I think in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next question. We have a bunch of them remaining. We have next question is on the GMAT, which is what is the weightage of GMAT scores in applications? And we know that you've already said that GMAT and undergraduate make up about a quarter of the application, but still, if there's anything you want to shine light on. And is GMAT preferred over the GRE for certain roles, or the other way around?
Let me take the second one. I think the second one, the clear answer is no. The percentage of people getting admitted to all business programs, right, with the GRE is on the rise. And schools have stopped differentiating very clearly between GMAT and GRE. And let me bust a myth here. They do not convert the GRE score into the GMAT score. Where they are evaluating. If you wrote the GRE, you will be evaluated with the GRE pool. If you are an engineer who wrote the GRE, they are not going to hold it against you. So these are all some of the myths that need real busting. This is not true. Take the test that you are most comfortable with, right?
Yeah.
It is at the end your ability to make decisions on simple problem statements that either of the tests is evaluating, right?
Right.
And then when it comes to GMAT and GRE, and what part does it play? A lot. Let's be honest, right? You're going to an academic institution, your ability to prove your academic rigor is important. And a little piece of nugget, right? Many years ago, GMAT conducted this survey with admissions officers on how much do they weigh each component, right? And the unequivocal answer was that the test is about 20% of their evaluation, and then an equal weightage on your undergrad performance. So guys, really, like about 30 to 35% is your academic potential. And if it is in your control, don't let anybody tell you that a low score is an okay score. If you can improve it, improve it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll just add a very small caveat because I think that answer was absolutely perfect. Uh, there are some schools which do convert the GRE to GMAT, but those are those are the exceptions, right?
Yeah.
In general, for top business schools, there is no difference between GMAT and GRE. Schools do not convert from GMAT to GRE or GRE to GMAT. They don't do that, but there would be exceptions always. For example, if please don't quote me on this, but I believe there is one of the Indian schools like IIM Ahmedabad or IIM Bangalore who do convert GRE to GMAT, right? But that is an exception. That is not the norm. If you go to international schools, most of the schools will have very clearly mentioned on their website that they do not differentiate, they do not have any preference for any particular school. Even in the US, there are one or two schools which do have a preference. But whenever they have a preference, they will mention it very clearly on their website. So whatever your target schools might be, check out the website, read through the GMAT GRE aspect, and see if they mention having any preference about any particular score. If they don't mention anything, you're absolutely in the clear. Feel free to apply with either of the scores, right?
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for that answer. We will move on to the next question. And before that, people who are asking questions in the chat, please make sure to not ask profile-specific questions. We won't be able to get to them because we want to make sure that the webinar is beneficial to everyone. But if you have questions that are a little bit more general, please feel free to ask them. We'll move on to the next question. It's about resumes. So how do you create standout resumes? And if there are any key pointers that you want candidates to keep in mind when they're making their resumes?
Right. Okay. Let me give you very small nuggets of creating standout resumes that we use with our candidates. The first one is action verbs. So make sure that you have action verbs in every single bullet of your resume. The second is create a story out of your experiences. Identify the best projects that you've worked on, build them out into the star format. So use the star format to sort of structure, provide the context, provide the actions that you've done and the results that you've associated with it. And I forget the third point, so I'll move on to Niketa. And if I recall that, I'll come back to this.
I'll just build on what you said, right? Tell a story, quantify the value of your work to your community, to your organization. Be very clear about that. But when you do that, don't claim the whole project as being done by you. Focus on what you have done. I think the fact is that a lot of people from similar sort of profiles apply, and schools do understand what an individual analyst or an individual contributor's role in a big project or a big team looks like. So by all means, talk about like the teamwork and say you contributed to certain outcomes, but focus on your role, right? Make sure that every story you tell brings out a skill that you bear.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me my third point as well. It was about showcase your leadership skills, right?
Yes.
And leadership does not mean that you have been managing a team. It could also be that you collaborated with others. It could also be that you assisted somebody else. It could also be that you initiated a project, right? So identify, as Niketa said, identify what did you do in your role and make sure that you sort of showcase the different kind of professional skills that you have developed through the work that you have done, and let it shine. Absolutely let it shine. Use quantification to sort of showcase the impact of your work, and that you understand the business impact of it.
Yeah.
The one thing that I suggest not to do and be very, very careful of is to make it super technical. Like, stay away from technical terms. You don't need to mention that, you can write code in JavaScript and Node.js and React and Python and C Sharp and all the other forms that you can think of. You don't need that. It does not add value to anyone on the admission side of the table, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that answer. I think that we can now move on to the next question. But before that, we have a short question from Rohan on the chat, and I think we can answer it, which is that how do you go about the school selection process? I'm sure that this was a question that had come in the beginning of the webinar, but so he's asked it now, they've asked it now. How do you go about the school selection process? Is it just the rankings? Is it just FT rankings? Is it, are EU Canadian schools inferior to the US schools when it comes to post MBA employment opportunities? Well, I mean,
Okay. We'll
yeah.
come to those. Let's
Yeah.
start with the B school selection. I think we addressed that very, very shortly in the beginning of the webinar as well. The first thing is the goals that we suggest. Look at the goals that you have and look at the post MBA opportunities that the schools that provide. Identify the best schools which align with those goals, and that gives you that initial list. Then look at what you bring. And depending on where your profile stands in comparison with those schools which align with your post MBA goals, rank them up as safe schools, dream schools, read schools, whatever designation or breakup you want to use. But that is how you basically go about selecting your school. Anything you would add,
Yeah.
Nikita, to that?
I would say it's a function of three things, right? Aspiration, achievability, value add. If you really want to work in the US, no point going to a European school, the transition is not going to happen, right? Similarly, right? Not all US schools are going to enable a transition into Europe. So you want to be very mindful of where the aspiration is. Right, achievability. You've really touched upon it, Piyush, where you've said, look at the profile, see what goes in. There is a match to it, so on and so forth. Right, you want to work in tech, you're better off in a certain set of schools, not in some of the Eastern schools that are very consulting heavy. Right, and this is particularly US. Right, you want to talk about that, and then the third piece is how much time do you have? Right, school selection is also a matter of you want to apply to 7 schools, you want to apply to 5 schools. What is your base minimum alternative of not going? Where's your hard stop, right? Applying to everything and saying I'm going to do 3 safeties, 3 targets, and 4 dreams is epic disaster, right? If you're not going to go to your safeties, do not apply to a lot of safeties, right? And the safety piece is where a lot of people do not make the right choice. But what is your safety, and why is it your safety? Okay. By defining that is very important. Some people say my safety is a debt-free MBA. Some people say my safety is the base minimum region that I would go to. Right, I'm okay being in the West Coast. I'll go as low as West Coast. Right. So defining what your safety is. Aspiration doesn't need definition. If admitted, it's going to go to the best business. Right. But the safety part, right, like your downside, right, is what you really need to think about more clearly, right? Why is it your safety, and therefore which ones, right? Yep.
Right. And I think, thank you for bringing that up. One thing that we do with our candidates very, very candidly is while we are choosing, okay, these are your dream, safe, reach, whatever schools. I only ask them one question when it comes to the safety school. If let's say everything fails, will you go to this school? If the answer is a yes, then apply to this school. If the answer is a no, then there's no point for us to waste our time on this particular application. Because even if worst has come to worst and this is the only school you're going to go to that you have an admit from, if you don't want to go to that school, then why did you even apply?
Yeah.
Right?
Then you're taking away valuable time from doing something else.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. The next question is on MBA essays. How should one go about brainstorming for MBA essays? Is the question that we've gotten from candidates all over the internet. So
Right.
go on.
That's an interesting
That's
and
a
very
very,
open-ended.
yeah, that's a very, it's a very hypothetical question for what is a very, very specific answer. Um, and there is no standard way. There are many types of MBA essays, right? So when you ask a question like, how do I go about an MBA essay, brainstorming an MBA essay? You are asking about, I don't know, like a very, very broad question. There are four different types of essays. You have to write a goals essay, you have to write a personal identity essay, you have to write a behavioral essay. At times, you have to write contributory or participative essays. So the approach on each of this is very different, and there is no any further detail I will give you will be as generic as the question, right? So sorry, humor me, but if I tell you, okay, introspect and figure out what makes you unique, but all over, the bottom line here is that every type of MBA essay requires a different methodology and requires a different process, is how I would think about it.
Right. Uh, Completely agree. It's a very difficult question because there is no specificity to it, right? Uh, the only thing, if I have to give a generic answer to this, I would say read the essay question multiple times, right? Because that will allow you to understand what exactly is the school asking. Most of the schools are very specific with their request in terms of what they want to see in the answer, and they give that question enough detail to give you that flavor of what exactly do they want, right? And then start thinking about the answer. How would you structure it? How would you frame it? What kind of experience or value should you showcase from that? That is, as Nikita said, those are very specific aspects and they would differ from the question type, right? If it's a behavioral essay, you would probably need to think about a particular situation or experience. If it's something else, if it's a goals essay, then you don't have any experiences in it. So that would depend, but whatever the question might be, understand why the school is asking that question. Uh, what exactly are they asking, and then sort of build out your structure from there. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen candidates make is when they start working on essays, a lot of times they don't even read the question properly. They just start answering something which they wanted to without understanding what the school or what the question was about. So, understanding what the school wants is very, very important uh, from that essay question itself, and not in a generic way.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nikita. Thank you, Piyush, for your
I
answers.
think I think we are running a bit late, right?
Yes,
Yeah, we are on the
Nikita,
clock.
yeah,
I can stick around for another 10 minutes or
let's
so.
10 minutes, right? So let's do for another 10 minutes, and then we can sort of
right.
maybe close the session.
Yes. So we have two questions remaining. Before that, a lot of people are asking about, career gaps and questions that we've already addressed. A recording of this stream will be available after we are done with the session. Also, shameless plug, we have done a lot of content creation on low GPA, on unconventional work backgrounds. I think I suggest that you check out our YouTube channel and you will get a lot of insight on your questions. We'll move on to the next question. This is about letters of recommendation. Who is the best person to take an LOR from? Does the designation matter more than the content? And what should I do if I'm an entrepreneur or I have a family business?
Hmm. Right. Do you want to take that, Nikita? I think I think Nikita is frozen. Uh, so let me answer that question. So when it comes to LORs, the best person to take your LOR or to give you an LOR is essentially the person who knows you the best, and that is usually going to be the manager that you report to, right? Uh, the designation does not matter. That is absolutely critical for you to understand. Uh, what matters is who is the senior person that you have been working with and reporting to the most. And if you're able to sort of address that, if you're able to take a recommendation from them, that is usually the best thing to do. Now, coming to the second part of the question, what you asked regarding if you are in a family business or you are an entrepreneur, who can you take it from? Uh, if let's say you have senior mentors, if you have clients that you've worked with, if you have vendors that you've worked with, those are the people who would be able to sort of who would form good referees for you, right? So we had candidates last year who came from their own family businesses, or they were entrepreneurs with very early startups, right? And they took their references from their clients or their vendors, and that worked out very, very nicely for them. Similarly, so basically, what you have to do is identify people who have worked closely with you, who understand what you bring, who have given you advice, both positive and negative, and who will be able to sort of champion you within the LOS, right? And I think that should sort of cover most of it, whatever be your case.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Piyush. Nikita, do we have you back? I think that she's
I think there's some network issue.
yeah. Okay, I think we'll move on to the next question then. This is something that Nikhil asked in the beginning of the webinar, and it's I think she's back. Okay, but
Yeah.
it's something that Nikhil asked in the beginning of the webinar, and it's about financing the MBA. So, how do you fund international MBA programs, and what factors are important to getting scholarships?
Right. So I leave this to Niketa. She has got much more scholarships than I have, and she has also gone to a US MBA program, so she probably knows much better than I do when it comes to financing from personal experience.
Okay, let me give you my view on scholarships. Yes, we do have a lot of scholarships. I try not to overplay that because it is a function of who you are and how you present your application. A lot more, right? It is a function of your GMAT. It is a function of the diversity you bring to the classroom and so on and so forth, right? Which is why it is more you,
I think.
right, than anybody else. It is absolutely the candidate, right? No, absolutely. I think it would be foolish to say that a underrepresented female candidate with a 770 GMAT and who's done exceptionally well in her career or community is not somebody people want in their classroom. Everybody wants that, right? And there is a element of we want to create that pathway. School will think about it like that. We want to create a pathway for you, right, to come and study at our institution. So that is the spirit of the scholarship. Let me put it that way, right? They want to offer gateways to folks and pave a path for them. That's how I would think about it. So that's about scholarships. And yes, it depends on what you've demonstrated so far, right? Bottom line, if you've demonstrated great community, academic, and professional work, right, and you make yourself one of those candidates that the school really wants in their classroom, you're positioning yourself well, right? That's about the scholarship. In terms of financing, I think it's a burning question with the rising cost of MBA and so on and so forth. I think a lot of EdFin financing companies are coming up. The cost of borrowing remains high, but I think folks are funding as much as 80% of the total cost of attendance. The one thing I would say here on financing and like the decision making and financial decision making is that it should not be an afterthought. It should be a pre-thought. And you should be talking to yourself about what is the right program length, what is the right sort of amount I want to pay for this, and accordingly choose your schools also appropriately. And then finally, I think it's a long game. It is not a short game. No MBA, like a very expensive degree, is not going to pay off in the short run. It usually pays off. Right? It's like a home loan, right? You're getting yourself a key to a lot of doors. It is going to pay over a long period of time, and that's the mindset you probably want to have. The mindset does not negate that the cost remains high, and the scholarship is an afterthought. So choice will be important.
Right.
When you, yeah, that's. I'll let you take it from there.
Right. I think the basic view that we have is very, very, it's very aligned. The one thing that I would want to add here is probably it's important to keep your finances in mind. It's important to sort of see, whether what you're comfortable with, right? But at the same time, I've seen a lot of candidates simply not decide not to apply to certain schools because they would be super expensive, right? And that is something where I fundamentally sort of disagree with them, that you cannot decide that. You don't know how much you will have to pay, because that financing aspect of how much you will actually end up paying is something that will be decided only once you have an admit and you have your scholarship results, right? Uh, so absolutely keep in mind, you have a broad picture of you already have a broad picture of how much you would expect to
I'm not sure I
how
understand.
much.
Sorry.
Okay,
My bad.
that was strange.
So sorry.
So you already have a broad view of what kind of cost would the MBA incur. For example, if you did that in India, if you did that in Europe, or if you did that in the US, right? So just to give a very ballpark figure, if you did it in India, it will cost you around 50 lakhs if you go to ISB, or much lesser if you choose the other places. If you go to Europe, the ballpark figure will be around 1 crore rupees. If you choose to go to US schools, that will be closer to 2 to 2.5 crore rupees, right? This already allows you to set a very clear expectation. What are you comfortable with, right? While knowing that loans up to 80% are possible and they are being taken by a lot of candidates as well, right? Even schools give out loans, student loans. For example, Kellogg, Cornell, these are schools which give out loans at very, very friendly rates, right? Uh, so financing it from a scholarship, from a loan perspective is possible, and you realize that. But so if you're applying, for example, to US schools, if you decided that you would want to apply to US schools, but you would apply to schools which cost around maybe 1.8 crores, but not 2 crores or 2.5 crores, that does not make sense to me, right? Because you don't know what will you get in terms of scholarships anyway. Scholarships, yes, there are a lot of factors going into it, but at the end of the day, I would say the admission process itself is a very uncertain process. And getting a scholarship is probably 5 times more uncertain than the admission process. So nobody goes into the process knowing exactly what is the scholarship that they'll receive, right? We have had candidates who received 100% scholarship from Darden, but they also received an admit from Booth with zero scholarship, right? And nobody could predict whatever happened here, right? So it's a very opaque process at the end of the day. You will only know what you need to pay once you've gone through it. So make sure that you don't decide not to apply to schools because of financial reasons, right? Uh, Absolutely take your shot, and then let the results sort of guide you in the direction what you want to choose and what not.
Thank you, Piyush. Nikita, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think that's a brilliant way to conclude. And I think the MBA, let me say by ending here, the MBA means different things to different people, right? And there are folks who've said, I want to be the big fish in the small pond, I'm eventually going to get the same job. I want a debt-free MBA, right? There are folks that place extensive emphasis on the cohort and the brand of the school, maybe their profession, post-MBA, or their aspiration requires it. Everything is legend, right? I think in the end, right, an MBA is a means to an end, right? So whatever path you take, right, through this entire journey, right, 5 years, 10 years later, possibly, you're going to end up in the same comfortable place. Just make sure that's the place you want to be.
Right. Absolutely.
And yeah, the scholarship consideration is that, literally that, right? A very strong candidate applying to under applying, right, is definitely going to yield scholarships, right? Like you've really highlighted, right? Like 100% scholarship at Darden and no money at Booth, right? Is a choice that the candidate will have to make.
Yeah. It was a very difficult choice. I will clarify.
It is a very difficult choice, right?
It
Particularly
was
in
an
an
absolutely
environment like
impossible
this.
choice. Yep.
Yep. And people struggle with these choices all the time, right? 2 months ago, that was the only conversation I was having with a lot of people. What do you do, right? And the brand value is intangible, right? It is very hard to assess, right? What you're going to get. So no, it's not an easy choice, and there is no right answer. That's the way to talk about it.
Anyway, I think we are done. Thank you so much. And it was really nice conversing this. Maybe we'll sort of have another session for round 2, Niketa, maybe. But
absolutely, I hope people took away some value from the conversation, the discussion, and I hope we were able to cover a large part of the questions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Piyush and Niketa, for joining us today. And just for people in the chat who's still asking questions or who ask profile-specific questions, check out our community, check out our profile evaluations, check out all of the content that we have on our YouTube. There's so much, and it'll answer a lot of your questions that you have right now. And a recording of the stream will be available in a bit on YouTube. So I think that should help answer your questions. Thank you so much. And we covered all of the questions. We did all of them. Yeah.
Nice.
Yes.
Thank you again. And thank you for
right.
joining, Niketa. Thank you for extending the
All
time
right.
as well.
Thank you, Piyush, for having
Thank
me.
you.
Much pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend, everybody.